Hello everyone, my name is Vincent and I'm going to be working with my partner Craylee Fernandez, and we're going to be talking about a very important and peculiar research. Let's get started. Linguistic Practice and Stereotypes Among Copenhagen's Adolescents. This is the name of the research. Okay, as I said before, I'm working with Craylee Fernandez and my name, Vicente Suarez. Okay, now we have the aim. This research has been based on how adolescents in Copenhagen interact among themselves and construct social meaning. The main aim was to analyze stereotypes and their associations with linguistic variations in adolescents. The method applied was a combination of social linguistics, ethnography, social psychology, and attitudes research. It shed light on relations between social categories, social practice, and linguistic variations among ninth graders. Social categories and social practice. Social categories and social practice. Copenhagen City School has around 900 pupils from different socioeconomic backgrounds. 64 out of 83 students were interviewed on the grounds of their ethnography. The ethnographic interviews were based on social categories, for instance, foreigners or Danes, rather than their social status. Analysis of social practice. On the one hand, we have the distinction between girls and boys, which is fixed, and there is no way to change it. And on the other hand, we have foreigners and Danes, which is of a different type. This distinction is determined by how people act in the social field. There were also other categories such as bilinguals, immigrants, and yet they were not considered as foreigners, because they didn't act as foreigners did. For instance, to be a foreigner demanded the individual to engage most with customs from the original countries rather than with the Danish one. The analysis of social practice was based on practices such as smoking, use of alcohol, whereabouts in the city, clothing, style, plans for the future, leisure activities, habits, etc. These practices grouped people into a cluster of stylistic practices that somehow contributed to the social meaning. As a result, students having some characteristics were given some labels by the pupils. These categories included labels such as foreign girls, foreign boys, nice Danish girls, nice Danish boys, tough Danish girls, and tough Danish boys, among others. Now we have the phonetic variation. We have two main standards here, traditional one and the non-traditional. The phonetic variation was analyzed with regard to 10 variables. First were the non-standard, which included variables that have been traditionally seen between high and low Copenhagen's speech, in young and old speech, and the non-traditional variables. This analysis was made through an auditive examination of the length of vowels, manners and points of articulation, of consonants, intonation, diffusion of consonants, among others. These variables on pronunciations are also present in other categories, such as Danish girls and boys, and foreign girls and boys, where the Danish group has the lead in the lengthening of short vowels. We can also find variables in the existing clusters, which are highly influenced by the social practice they shared in common.
Now let's turn to the first part of my talk, which is about perception of speakers. This research documents several key contributions made to the field of the social practice. Now I want to mention how a speaker perceives linguistic practice and stereotype in social situations. Nonetheless, it was a particular community at the city school which was studied to see language attitude emerge from a series of interactions among adolescents. One of the main purpose was to listen to different speakers from distinct regions, accents, reading the same text. Now, they also were evaluated with an instrument, which is a questionnaire, in order to evaluate the speaker's dialect variation. This leads me to the point, which is how this method was centered in this research. This method was centered on the attitudes of adolescents who were evaluating Canadian English and Canadian French speakers by listening to their different dialect variations. As I said before, one of the instruments used to make this research possible was a questionnaire. So, what was the analysis for? This analysis was to show stereotypes in order to represent the social identity. To illustrate these points, this was to analyze their reactions and to observe the relationship between the social meaning and the speech they listened to by examining stereotypes related to the language used. Subsequently, these stereotypes were developed through repeated acts, practices that were carried out and experienced by individuals. So, based on our findings, the verbal guise study was a method to study language attitudes and also was designed to involve adolescents from Copenhagen to listen to a series of speakers and they stereotype each of them on essential factors such as intelligence, correctness, and kindness. To put it more simply, the verbal guise was carried out into different schools. They are the city schools and the north schools. The connection between category membership, practice, and linguistic variation are not locally tied, but they can be found in a larger speech community. It is quite important to mention that not all of the speakers were evaluated similarly in the two schools, and this suggests that there are some ways of speaking that are not recognized as having the same social meaning potentials in both communities. We would like to conclude by there was one important approach which was the social psychological approach, and it used a verbal guise as a technique to elicit the stereotypical perceptions of speakers. This research also finds that adolescents construct social meanings that are not necessarily similar to perceptions of the same linguistic variations. We have to say thank you so much for your nice attention, and if you have any questions, just let us know.